Picture this. You've just pulled into your son's driveway. Or maybe it's your daughter's. You've been looking forward to this visit for weeks. You made the drive. You brought their favorite dessert. You told yourself this time would be different. And now you're sitting in the car, rehearsing. You're going through possible conversation topics in your head, trying to remember which subjects are safe and which ones might set something off. Thinking about whether to ask about the grandchildren, about the job, about, well, you know what I mean. You love your child deeply. That has never been in question. But somewhere along the way, the easy conversations stopped being easy. And you can't quite figure out when that happened, or why, or what to do about it. So you take a breath. You pick up the dessert from the passenger seat, and you walk to the front door hoping, just hoping, that today feels a little bit more like connection and a little bit less like walking on eggshells. If that image feels familiar to you, I want you to know something important before we go any further. You are not a bad parent. You are not failing at this relationship. You are a parent who cares enough to want more, and that desire is exactly the right starting point. For more than 40 years, I've worked as a family psychologist specializing in intergenerational relationships. The sometimes wonderful, sometimes painful, always complicated bonds between parents and their adult children. And in that time, I have sat across from hundreds of parents, good, loving, devoted parents, who felt exactly the way you might be feeling right now. Disconnected, confused, a little bit grieving the closeness they once had or the closeness they always hoped for. And in almost every one of those cases, the turning point wasn't a dramatic conversation or a grand gesture. It was a question. The right kind of question, asked at the right moment with the genuine intention to hear the answer. Today, I'm going to give you 5 of those questions. Not small talk. Not interrogations. Not leading questions designed to prove a point. 5 questions that actually open doors. Let's begin. Before I give you the 5 questions, I need to spend a few minutes on something that most people skip over, and it's the reason these questions work so well when you finally use them. Most parents, when they visit their adult children, fall into a trap. And it's a completely understandable trap because it comes from a place of love. I call it the evaluation mode trap. Without realizing it, the questions we ask our adult children tend to function less like invitations and more like assessments. How's work going? Which your child hears as, are you succeeding? Are you eating well? Which lands as, I'm monitoring your choices. When are you going to? I think we all know how that one ends. These aren't malicious questions. They come from genuine care and investment in your child's life. But the problem is that your adult child, who is, by definition, an adult, processes them through a very particular filter. Your child wants to be seen as a capable, competent grown person living their own life on their own terms. And every question that even slightly resembles a report card triggers a kind of quiet resistance, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle. The conversation gets shorter. The answers get thinner. And you both end up sitting in the same room, feeling like you're performing a visit rather than actually having one. Here's the psychological distinction I want you to hold on to for the rest of this video. There are 2 kinds of questions we ask the people we love. The first kind is what I call interrogation questions. Questions that, however well-intentioned, signal that we're evaluating whether the person's life meets our expectations. The second kind is what I call connection questions. Questions that signal genuine, open-ended curiosity about who this person actually is, right now, in this chapter of their life. The 5 questions I'm about to share with you are all connection questions. None of them have a right answer. None of them come with a hidden grade. They are simply invitations, open doors, that give your adult child the space to step toward you. And here is what 40 years of clinical work has taught me. Most adult children desperately want to step toward their parents. They just need the door to look safe enough to walk through. Question 1. What's something you've figured out recently that surprised you? Let that land for a moment. What's something you've figured out recently that surprised you? Think about what this question does that "how's work going?" simply cannot. When you ask your adult child what they've figured out recently, you are doing something very specific. You are communicating that you see them as a capable, growing, thinking adult, someone who is still learning, still evolving, still discovering things about themselves and the world. You are not asking them to report. You are asking them to share. There's a concept in psychology called self-determination theory, developed by researchers Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. It tells us that human beings have three core psychological needs: autonomy, the need to feel in control of their own life; competence, the need to feel capable and effective; and relatedness, the need to feel genuinely connected to others. The question, "What have you figured out recently?" speaks directly to the first two. It honors their autonomy. It acknowledges their competence. And in doing so, it creates the conditions for the third, genuine relatedness. Here is a sample of how this might actually sound in a real visit. You've just sat down together with coffee. There's been some small talk about the drive, the weather, maybe the grandchildren. And then, instead of asking, "So how's everything going at work?" you pause and you say, "You know what I've been curious about? What's something you figured out recently, something that kind of surprised you?" Your child might hesitate at first. This isn't the question they were expecting. But watch what happens. Maybe they tell you they finally found a system for managing their stress. Maybe they share something they learned about their own parenting. Maybe they talk about a skill they didn't know they had. Whatever they say, the important thing is that they said something real. Now here is your coaching note for this question, and I'll give you one of these for each of the 5. When they answer, resist the urge to top it. I mean this gently but seriously. One of the most common ways we accidentally close the door we've just opened is by responding to our child's answer with our own parallel story. "Oh, that's interesting. You know, when I was your age, I figured out that..." And suddenly the conversation has shifted back to us. Just listen. Reflect back what you heard. Let their answer be the whole point. Question 2. What does a really good week look like for you these days? Now, this might seem like a simple question, but I want to show you exactly why it is so much more powerful than what most of us ask instead. The most common version of this question is, "Are you happy?" And on the surface, that seems like a caring, loving thing to ask. But think about what "are you happy?" actually does. It's a binary, yes or no. It's evaluative. And more than that, it carries an invisible standard. Our standard for what happy should look like. "Are you happy?" puts your child in a position of either reassuring you or disappointing you. Neither of those leads to an honest conversation. What does a really good week look like for you these days? Does something completely different. It hands the definition of good back to your child entirely. It says, "I'm not here to measure your life against my expectations. I'm genuinely curious about what brings you joy, what feels satisfying, what constitutes a win for you right now." And that distinction, that transfer of authority over their own life, is enormous. In my clinical practice, I have been genuinely surprised by what parents learn when they ask this question. A daughter who seemed distant turns out to be thriving in ways her mother never knew, because she stopped assuming her daughter's good week would look anything like her own. A son who seemed underachieving by certain measures revealed a richness and intentionality in his daily life that his father had simply never thought to ask about. Your adult child has built a life. It may look different from the life you imagined for them. That is not a problem to be solved. It is a life to be known. This question is your invitation to know it. Coaching note: when they describe their good week, resist the urge to problem solve. If they mention that a good week is one where they get some time alone, don't say, "Well, maybe you should try to." Just let it be information. Let it be a window into who they are. Question 3. Is there anything you wish I understood better about your life right now? This is the bravest question on this list. And it is also the most powerful one. Is there anything you wish I understood better about your life right now? I want you to take a breath before you consider asking this one, because it requires something from you that the other questions don't. It requires what I call relational vulnerability. When you ask this question, you are acknowledging something. You are saying, I know I don't have perfect understanding of your life. I know there may be things I've gotten wrong, or assumptions I've made, or gaps in what I see. And I'm inviting you to fill those in. That is not a weak thing to say. That is an extraordinarily courageous thing to say. And your adult child knows the difference. This question comes from a concept in family therapy called relational repair. The idea that relationships can be strengthened not just through good times, but through the act of acknowledging where misunderstanding has existed and creating a moment of voluntary honesty. Now, I want to be direct with you about something. You might not love the answer. Your child might tell you something that stings. They might share a perception of you that feels unfair. They might tell you about a burden they've been carrying that you didn't know existed. They might say something that makes you want to defend yourself immediately. And here is your job in that moment. Don't. Just listen. Just breathe. Just say, thank you for telling me that. I didn't know. You can process it later. You can even come back to it gently in a future conversation. But in the moment, your only job is to receive it without shutting it down. Because here is the truth I have watched play out in family after family over 4 decades. The moment a parent can hear hard feedback and not collapse into defensiveness, that is the moment the relationship changes. That is the moment your adult child realizes they are safe with you. That they can be honest with you. That they don't have to manage your feelings on top of everything else. And from that moment, closeness becomes possible in a way it simply wasn't before. Coaching note, you can soften the entry into this question. You might say it like this. I want to ask you something and I really mean it. Is there anything about your life right now that you wish I understood better? I'm asking because I want to get it right. That framing signals sincerity and takes some of the edge off. Question 4. What's something you're proud of that I might not know about? Let me share something I've observed repeatedly in my clinical work. A pattern that breaks my heart every time I see it. Adult children who feel invisible to their parents. Not unloved. Not neglected. Just invisible. Seen only as a role, as a spouse, a parent, a worker, but not as a full, rich, complex person with interior accomplishments and quiet victories that no one ever thought to ask about. A woman in her mid-40s who had quietly built a creative practice that sustained her through years of difficulty. Her parents had no idea, because they never asked. A man who had overcome a profound personal struggle through sheer discipline and self-awareness. He had never told his parents because they only asked about the external metrics of his life. What's something you're proud of that I might not know about? This question says something profound to your adult child. It says, I believe you have a whole dimension of your life that I haven't seen yet, and I want to see it. This connects to Erik Erikson's concept of generativity, the deep human need, especially in midlife, to feel that our efforts matter and are witnessed by the people we love. Your adult child, whatever age they are, needs to feel that their growth and accomplishments are seen, not compared, not contextualized, not immediately followed by, that's great, but just seen. When you ask this question, you give them that. I have seen parents discover that their adult child had quietly published a book of poetry, that they had run their first half marathon, that they had learned a second language, that they had finally forgiven someone. Small victories and large ones, all of them important, all of them real, all of them invisible until someone asked. Coaching note: after they share, celebrate without qualifying. The most common mistake here is the reflexive qualifier. Oh, that's wonderful. Why didn't you ever tell me? That turns a moment of connection into a moment of mild reproach. Just say, I'm so glad I know that. That really means something. And let that be enough. Question 5. What can I do to make this visit feel good for you? This is the question that most parents never think to ask. And it may be the one that matters most of all. What can I do to make this visit feel good for you? Let me tell you what this question does that almost nothing else can. In my 40 years of working with families, one of the most consistent sources of conflict during visits, especially between parents and adult children, is what I call the unspoken agenda mismatch. Both sides come in with expectations they've never articulated out loud. The parent hopes to spend time in a certain way. The adult child has a certain kind of visit in mind. Neither one communicates this clearly. And before long, someone is frustrated, someone is withdrawn, and no one quite knows what went wrong. Research on family interactions consistently shows that unspoken expectations, not bad intentions, are the primary driver of family tension. We assume the other person knows what we need. We assume we know what they need. And we are frequently entirely wrong. Asking, "What can I do to make this visit feel good for you?" dissolves that mismatch before it can form. Maybe your child will say, "Just be relaxed, Mom. Don't worry about cleaning or organizing." Maybe they'll say, "I'd love if we could just watch a movie together without any heavy topics." Maybe they'll say, "I actually really want to talk to you about something. Can we find a quiet time?" Whatever they say, you now have a map. You are no longer navigating blind. And here is something even more important. When you ask this question, you are communicating something about who you are as a parent. You are saying, "I am secure enough, and I care enough about you to put your experience of this visit on the same level as my own." That is not weakness. That is wisdom. And your adult child recognizes it as such. Coaching note: ask this question before the visit, not during. A text or phone call 1 or 2 days ahead. "I'm looking forward to seeing you. Is there anything you'd like us to do, or anything I can do to make it a really good visit?" Asking it in advance gives your child time to actually think about it, rather than putting them on the spot at the front door. Now, I want to spend a few minutes on something that most advice videos skip entirely, but without it, none of these questions will work the way they should. What you do after you ask them. The questions open the door, but your listening is what makes it safe to walk through. Here are 3 things I want you to practice avoiding when your adult child answers. First, don't interrupt. This one sounds obvious, but it is harder than it seems, especially when your child says something that sparks a memory, an opinion, or an instinct to help. Let them finish the thought. Let there be a pause after they finish. That pause is not awkward. It is respect. Second, don't redirect to your own experience. This is the most common way we accidentally close the door. "Oh, I know exactly what you mean. When I was your age." And the conversation has shifted. Stay with them a little longer before making it about you. Third, don't minimize. If they share something vulnerable, resist the instinct to reassure too quickly. "Oh, it'll be fine," can land as, "I don't want to sit with your discomfort." Sometimes what your child needs is not reassurance. It's just to feel heard. And here is the one thing I always want you to do. Reflect back what you heard before you respond. It can be as simple as this. "So, what I'm hearing is," or, "It sounds like this has meant a lot to you." That small act of reflection tells your child that you were actually listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak. And it creates a feeling of being understood that most people rarely experience, even with the people they love most. One final note on these 5 questions: they are not a one-visit fix. They are a practice. The first time you ask, "Is there anything you wish I understood better about your life?" your child might look at you a little sideways. That's okay. Come back to it. Try it again next time. Over months, over visits, over conversations, the trust builds. The doors open wider. That is how real reconnection happens. I want to come back to the person we started with. The parent in the car, sitting in the driveway, dessert on the passenger seat, a little anxious, hoping for something more than they've been getting. Imagine that same parent, but now they have something different with them. Not a script, not a list of rules, Just one question. One simple question that came from genuine curiosity about their child's life, asked without an agenda, with a real willingness to hear the answer. That parent walks to the front door differently. Not because they've figured everything out, but because they've stopped trying to manage the visit and started trying to be present for it. And sometimes that shift, that tiny internal shift from managing to being present, is exactly what a relationship has been waiting for. You have more influence over this relationship than you may feel right now. Not the controlling kind of influence. The quiet, powerful kind that comes from showing up with curiosity instead of expectations, with openness instead of judgment, with a question instead of an answer. That is what I want for you. That is what is possible for you. Here is what I want you to do before you close this video. Pick one question from today. Just one. Don't try to use all 5 at once. That would be a conversation, not a visit. Just pick the one that resonated most, the one that felt a little brave, and carry it with you into your next visit. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to set it up. Just wait for a quiet moment and ask. See what happens. If this video helped you, please share it with another parent who might need it. A friend, a sibling, someone in your life who is navigating this same distance and doesn't quite know where to start. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Which of the 5 questions are you going to try first? Tell me. I read every comment, and your experience matters to me. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Every week on Strong Elderly Life, we talk about the things that actually matter in this chapter. How to stay close to the people you love, how to stay true to yourself, and how to live with the dignity and strength you've earned. Next week, we're going to talk about what to do when your adult child still won't open up, even when you're doing everything right. Because sometimes the distance runs deeper, and you need a different set of tools entirely. That video is coming soon, and I think it's one you'll want to see. Until then, take care of yourself. You matter. And the work you're doing on this relationship matters more than you know. I'll see you next week.